what's rewarding and motivating for you so that you can keep showing up for the team.
Welcome to the LabVIEW Experiment. I am your host, Sam Taggart from SAS Workshops. In my 15 years of working with and training developers, I've had the opportunity to conduct a lot of experiments. Over here, we believe in embracing failure as the essential learning experience that it is. And what better way to learn than from other people's mistakes? In this podcast, I talk to industry experts, colleagues, and friends about their failures and how they have turned them into future successes. I am here today with Tricia Broderick. I met Tricia recently, probably about, 2 years ago? Something like that. We are both friends with Llewellyn Falco, who is very prolific. Lots of people know Llewellyn. And he was in town and he had some kind of get together and they happened to do it at Tricia's house, which surprisingly is only a couple miles from my house, but I didn't know that at the time. And yeah, we had a great time. We hit it off. I met a lot of really cool people. And then I started going to the Agile Denver, and I don't know if I started going to those before the dinner with Llewellyn or not. I don't remember exactly the time frame there, but yeah, welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, there's nothing like Llewellyn calling you up. Can I use your house to host a dinner party? Sure.
Well, you know, you're
I love
probably
it.
going to get some interesting guests.
It was perfect. I loved it. I was like, I kind of wish more people would do that. It was fantastic.
Yeah, there were a bunch of people there. There's probably like 20
Yeah,
people there.
it was genuinely like he was like, I have people in that area. I want to do a dinner party. I need a house. Can I use yours? So I was like, why, yes, you can. I mean, I knew some of the people, but there were a lot of people that I didn't know. And so it was awesome. It was fun.
Llewellyn was the only person that I knew, so you all were very welcoming.
Oh,
So
really? Okay. Yeah, I did know a couple people, but I didn't realize that Llewellyn was the only one you knew. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it happened because he and I were working on his approval testing. I don't know if you've used that or you know what that is, but one of his big projects, I guess. And
He's
yeah,
always got some project going.
oh well, yeah, he definitely has his he's in a lot of different things. Um, but you recently wrote a book, and I started reading it, and I have not gotten very far. I'm maybe like 50 pages in or something, a couple chapters in. I like it. It's very good. The title of the book is Lead Without Blame. And when I heard the title, I was like, I didn't quite know what to make of it. The subtitle though, what is the subtitle? Remind me.
Building resilient learning
That
teams.
that was the thing that I think resonated with me more, because I don't know if you know Kyle Griffin Naratea. He was at the Kyle. He was one of the everything. I don't know. I interviewed him for this, and he was talking about learning teams and like how you should optimize for learning. And I thought that was a very interesting discussion. It kind of dovetailed with that building learning resilient teams. So
Yeah, it was an interesting, I mean, a little history, a little background, a little behind the scenes. Both Diana and I were being contacted by a specific editor at a publisher to write. And and when she approached us independently, we were both kind of going, "Well, I only want to write with somebody else." And then she's like, "Oh, maybe you know each other." And we did, and we had known each other for years, but we hadn't necessarily worked together. It was important for this editor, though, to have some element of blame in it. And so we really let this book emerge. And as we kept letting it emerge, there was an element that we went back and forth about the title and Lead Without Blame, because I genuinely don't think any leader is walking around going, who can I blame today? I just don't think a lot of people will necessarily resonate like that. That's what I'm doing. But yet we decided to go down there too, because at the end of the day, even if it's not your intent, it's what's experienced, it's what's felt, it's what the impact can be, whether it's because it's intentional or unconsciously, and those things. But yes, as we the thread behind the book in it became about building resilient learning teams, and so it became important to have both elements to it.
yeah, actually, that brings up an important point. So last time I talked to you, you recommended a book to me, Think Again by Adam Grant. I
Yes.
did read that book, and it was very good.
I feel, since I recommended, I feel happy about that. I'm not sure how I feel. Yeah, I love that book.
But that also dovetails because in that he talks about NASA and they had a performance culture, but their performance culture actually had a lot of blame involved in it too, in that you didn't want to be the one that delayed the launch or whatever.
Right. A
Or
lot
wasted.
of unintentional consequences to a lot of the behaviors and habits and the systems that we have set in place that with good intent often, but it doesn't mean that the impact's always positive.
Where do you think that comes from? Does that come from like the Taylorism and all of that stuff, or?
I do think there's a lot of that are just our natural human desire for certainty, right? So we pretended that we lived in a task world because that's what it's there's an element of me that gets really annoyed even sometimes when people are like, well, that's all from the industrial age. Even during the industrial age, there was need for innovation. There was need for, knowledge work and things along those lines. But we could spend more time best practicing the task work, best practicing scaling and things along those lines for very known tasks and things. And that gave certainty, that gave predictability, that gave clarity, that made our brains happy. And so double down on it. And in terms of what were best practices when it came to leadership, organizational structure, processes, policies, and that then migrates into more of today's very chaotic, complex world. And it usually causes more harm than it does good because any metric can be gamed, any metric can be manipulated, right? In these different ways. And even with good intent, it can still have like blame cultures and which then limits people's willingness to learn, people's willingness to be curious, people's willing ability to deliver. And so yeah, I do think it's rooted not so much in old type of work versus new type of work, but in the type of work that our brains like to optimize. And once we found out we could optimize a certain type of work, we just tried to apply it to everything. And that's what tends to get us into trouble a lot.
So that raises an interesting question for me. There is this idea of like no estimates. There's the whole no estimates crowd. How do you feel about that? Because I kind of feel like that in some ways plays into this conversation because often estimates are used as like a big stick to beat people over the head with.
Yeah. And that is the case. And Woody Zool is a prime driver of the no estimates. And I actually think I read something not too long ago that he almost wishes it was labeled something slightly different. Don't quote me on this, Woody. I'm sorry if I'm
Yeah.
messing your work up. Because even in the work that I understood when it came to the movement of no estimates, it wasn't about like zero estimates. It was actually never like zero, never, don't do bother, don't. There's still benefit in doing some rough gauging, some things. The problem is when you're trying to get to precision and that's when you can get into a lot of problems. There's a lot of benefit of just kind of doing some rough relative sizing and gauging of things and getting because it helps you to discover like if you say something super big and I'm like, no, it's no big deal. There's something you're thinking of that I might not be, and just even having that conversation can be powerful. It's where we get in trouble is the precision. So I like the concepts of whether people misunderstand no estimates or not, I like the concepts of making sure that you understand the benefit of estimating is for discovery and alignment, not for predictability. And if you try and get into those other benefits, secondary benefits, prediction and projection and all of those kinds of things, now you're getting into a weaponization category that is very likely.
Yeah, as a consultant, I run into that because people often want estimates. But what I am a big fan of, though, is throwing out an order of magnitude very early on.
Yeah.
Just like you said, like if I think it's a $50,000 job and you think it's a $5,000 job,
There's some
there's
information that we
something,
should talk
yeah,
about.
we need to have a conversation. And maybe we're both being realistic, but like you didn't convey the scope clearly or vice versa or something like that.
Or I might know something or you might know something, right? But where I literally had a team once fight for an hour over whether something was going to take 1 hour or two. I was like, I cannot. You just spent an hour wasting talking about whether something was going to take 1 hour or two. It's just not, it is waste. That is waste.
Yeah, the other thing I find that goes along with estimations is deadlines. And usually those, I have a very interesting relationship with deadlines. Like I feel like a large portion of them are often arbitrary. Sometimes they have real deadlines, like, we're going to launch something to Mars and there's like a perfect window to do it. Like, yeah, or we're going to observe something in the stars and it has to happen by then. But, and also it kind of goes along with too that like the non-agile way of thinking of like we have to have everything done on this date versus like, well, if we have to ship something on this date, but what if we have 80% of it done and we have
Yeah. So that's my general rule is like, you can have a fixed date, then the scope has to be flexible. If the
yeah,
if the scope is fixed, then the date has to be flexible. Like you don't
you
get
can't get
both in
both.
knowledge
Yeah,
work. And
yeah.
if it's something we haven't done, and I can absolutely fix a date, but then my scope has to be flexible of what that means.
Yeah. No, that is definitely a thing.
But unfortunately, a lot of, again, businesses, financial departments, and things all centered around that. No, here's your iron triangle of your date, your budget, your, and
Yeah.
scope, and we need to know it up front because that's going to give us security to lock it in. And I always kind of joke when I'm working with somebody in a finance department, I'm like, yeah, how's that working out for you? Like, because they miss the deadlines all the time, quality's dropping, we're not delivering for the customers, we're doing all these horrible, like, sure, your specific metrics that you're looking at could potentially be like look good, but let's look at the bigger picture of why we're really doing this, and it's to deliver for customers. And that's getting lost in that. And so there's challenging to like what you highlight of just like what really is behind that date. Is it really arbitrary? Is it real like what's going on? Or is it because it's a best practice in the finance that you're supposed to have all three?
Yeah. Definitely. You also hit on something else that I think teams struggle with, and that is the local optimization problem, which often you see like in the old school, more waterfall things. It's like, well, I did my part. I gathered the requirements correctly. I can't help that the designer didn't design them all in, or
I get a bonus.
yeah,
Yeah, well, and again, that leads back, I mean, common theme that we've already been talking about, right? But it leads back to the as long as you do your part really well, it will just magically blend all together. And that can work in task-based work. It just doesn't in knowledge work. And too often then we're finger pointing to, well, that's not my problem and I did this. And in the end, our customers are the ones that lose. Our organizations lose. And ultimately you lose too, even if your part was really good. Like you're losing as well.
yeah. Well, that also hits on another thing that I'm curious to hear some thoughts on, and that is, I feel like a lot of the reason we get into that, it has to do with incentive structures. And have you found a good way to incentivize better group behavior? I might call it.
Yeah,
Or
so there's a number of different things that are out there. And I don't know if I just call this incentivizing. We speak a lot about essential motivators. And so, too often on a team, there's not even a shared common meaningful purpose. Like one team of people shoved together are working on 17 different products. And so why wouldn't they look at it from their parts, right? If they don't have some kind of shared meaningful purpose, why would they remotely care about anything beyond their part, right? And so there's too often I see that dynamic. Then we see the dynamic of just autonomy, right? And if you've got some leader that's really micromanaging and nobody's allowed to do or own anything, then it gets really hard again to be incentivized to be invested, to care beyond whatever was technically assigned to me because I don't really care, right? Like that's all that was assigned to me. I just need to do my part. And then the third essential motivator that we really go into quite a bit is co-intelligence. And what we mean behind that is really creating a space, not about incentives of like, here's your bonus or things like that, because actually a lot of work by like Daniel Pink and Drive, the research has highly shown in knowledge work, the same external motivations are not quite there. But instead, looking at and going in a team environment, are you intentionally building collaboration, not cooperation, not my part, your part, we'll work together if you ask me for help, but truly, what are we building together? What are we feeding off of each other's ideas? Like even as we've been doing this podcast, I'll say something, you're like, well, that makes me think of this, right? Like this is collaborate. Like you wouldn't have had that thought if I had been talking, or at least not instantly in that moment, right? And there's so many things that we benefit from collaboration, and not only in like bringing my skill sets and your skill sets, but as we talk, we're unlocking even new ideas, new things that neither one of us had even thought about. And that's really what co-intelligence is about. And so we really focus on those kind of essential motivators to incentivize. Sure, depending on like, I'm not a big fan of individual performance reviews. We could have a whole podcast on my feelings about performance reviews. But like, and I, and generally I try and do team rewards, so whether it's financial or lunches or whatever, but I also ask the team what they want for in terms of rewards and how they are looking at that. And I think that's one of those things that we make assumptions a lot of times about what incentivizes a team and in terms of those traditional incentivizer elements, and we should just be asking people because what might be really wonderful for one person could be different for somebody else.
Yeah, that is really true. Yeah, asking people what they want is definitely.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I used to go to this business coach, and he told a story once about how these guys wanted to incentivize their salespeople, so they decided they would enroll them in the Steak of the Month Club. And the first lady that won was a vegan, and it kind of had the opposite effect.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Exactly. Of course, of course.
and they
But
thought they were
I
doing the
mean, it's
right
a
thing because
good
they're like, we
thought,
really want
right?
to
It's
incentivize
thoughtful, it's
people.
those
Yeah.
things. But yes, I think this is one of those times that we just have to be better about asking people like what's rewarding and motivating for you so that you can keep showing up for the team and what that looks like.
Yeah, I think possibly one of the reasons that has problems is it's hard to scale because like the more people on your team, the more people you have to pay attention to, and there is some limit to.
Well, but also why you shouldn't have a really huge team either.
Yeah, no, I remember working
Because that's going
with
to
a
lend
team.
itself to the parts even more. The bigger you get, the more people will start naturally, coalescing and creating little cliques and things like that. And you're going to break down collaboration in a different way.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. Yeah, I feel like in the software development world in particular, we tend to not work well as a team. We tend to call people teams and then we put them all in a room. And the analogy I use is it's almost like a basketball coach before a game saying, we need to do rebounds, we need to do free throws, and we need to do block shots. So you take a ball and go over there and block shots, and you take a ball and go do rebounds, and you go do free throws. And like, that's not the way the game's played.
Well, and I got to tell you, I mean, I went to college a long time ago, but my son is currently in CU Boulder for computer science. And we had to have a conversation this week about a team group project that they had and how a bunch of them didn't even show up for the final presentation. One had never did any commits in their Git at all. And he's like, Mom, what do I do? And I was like, okay, but this is part of what we are, they're not teaching teamwork in college either, right? And then they get into the workplace, they haven't been taught teamwork in college in a lot of cases. Even if they had group projects, it doesn't go very well. And so they get into the workplace, they're happy to have a job in different ways, or they're nervous about their starting things, and they don't know how to work in a team. We, as much as humans in general are social and and connected, we don't know how to collaborate very well with people, and especially people that are different, and sometimes even the people that are very similar to us is as difficult as it is when it's somebody different. But I am literally having those conversations with my son this week about what teamwork should really look like, what it really means, and why that's also, though, is not unexpected of what his experience.
Yeah, well, I think the individualistic stuff and the individual incentives and stuff goes all the way back to college and high school and stuff because you're taught like you must take this test alone. You're not allowed to look anything up. You're not allowed to ask anybody. You're not allowed to help anybody. And then you throw them into a work environment where it's like, hey, here, you four people go do this thing. And they don't even think to work together because they've been trained their entire life. Like, I just
Yeah,
do
they're not getting
that.
graded on their team collaboration. They're getting graded on the final outcome. And as long as one kid picks up and does the slack, then they're all good.
Yeah, that's definitely, and it's very frustrating if you're that one kid.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And and it is fascinating. He was like, "Mom, I can't even believe one of my teammates didn't even show up for the presentation." Like, but it happens. It happens in the workplace too.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely does. I feel like at least in college, maybe you have a little bit more chance to choose your team sometimes. In workplace, you just kind of get thrown in and it's like,
I don't, yeah, I'm not sure about that one. I'll have to ask him that.
I remember some of our college classes, we just got thrown in teams and some we got to pick. So,
Yeah, it was too long ago for me. I don't
but
remember.
yeah, definitely that is one of the biggest challenges I think in being out in industry is being put on a team and just like having zero say in who's on the team.
Yeah.
And and I think that
Well,
goes
and
to
that's where the
um,
that motivator of autonomy comes into play too.
yeah, yeah, that's definitely a big thing. But yeah, you mentioned large teams. I worked on a team when I was at Westinghouse and we had like 30 people and like one person managing it. And it was very, and to his credit, like he had 30 people to manage, so it was really hard. But like I just remember like things like, he'd be talking to a chemist and he'd call him like a metallurgist or something. He's like, he doesn't even know what I do, and blah blah blah. And it was like it caused all kinds of problems trying to manage
And I'm
them.
not opposed to big teams. You just have to also understand what the impacts of it are going to be.
I don't know. I have this theory that a good, well-run, well-organized small team could outperform a larger team if they're not. I
Oh,
mean,
wow, I
I'm sure you can have a
100%
large
agree
team
with that
that's
statement.
that's high functioning, but It just seems like the larger the team, the more chance for dysfunction.
100. I don't know if there's more. I think there's just different impacts and different risks and challenges. But I 100% agree that adding more people, like I mean, people have talked about the Mythical Man Month, forever. But adding more people does not necessarily mean more productivity.
Yeah. Well, there was something, and I think it was Malcolm Gladwell book that I read, and he was talking about how I think it was chimpanzees or something. Like they have a maximum size of group that they will stay in, and if it gets
Oh.
larger, they break up because your brain you can only keep track of. I think it was like 40 people. Like once you get above 40 people, it's impossible to remember everybody's name, and that
There's
then
there's other stuff like tipping.
tipping
It's
point
making
is
me
one
think
of
of
his
like the
books. Yeah.
tipping point and Dunbar's law, and there's a number of studies that are out there about this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so like the larger things get, it's just it's one of those things where like, I look at most big companies and I'm sure not all of them, but most of them have some dysfunction. And in my mind, it just has to do with the fact that like once you get to scale, like you can't, when you're a small 10-person team, you can be very careful about who you hire and you can know, once you get to like a couple hundred, like you lose control and also like that messaging and your point of having like a clear purpose, you need that person at the front setting the message, and the more people you have to disseminate to, the harder it gets.
Yeah. I mean, scale is tricky. Scale is tricky. It adds new complexities.
Yeah.
You know.
So, can you tell me a little bit more about Agile Denver for maybe for anybody who
Ooh, Agile
doesn't know?
Denver. Yes. So I have to I have to own that I moved to Denver area. I guess it was like 12 years ago or so. And so I, for a very long time, was just like, I'd support, I'd speak at, right, and doing things. But Agile Denver is a nonprofit that's really focused on trying to support the Agile community here on the Front Range. And a couple years ago, I found myself with a little bit of extra bandwidth, which never fails. Like the minute you're like, oh, I have a little bit of extra bandwidth, the minute you're like, take on something new, suddenly 20,000 things hit you all at once. But I was like, oh, I have a little bit of extra bandwidth. I'm ready to give back again in different ways. And so I joined the board of directors for Agile Denver here and for the past 2 years. And it's been just a wonderful experience getting to put on events, help create community, help get people engaged and involved, and just support, especially with things that are happening in the industry and the world right now, and put that out there. So it's something that I think is just an amazing community, and we have some really quality Agilists in this area, and so we just have this really cool community here.
Yeah, I think I've only come to a handful of the happy hours, but it's been quite nice. And we've had some very
Yeah.
interesting discussions, and it's always interesting, especially when you're there, because we always end up talking about stuff that like kind of feels like it comes out of left field, but then it's always like it connects somehow. So
Well, I think that's one of the coolest things I have found about this particular community is it's open, right? It's engaging, it's open. I mean, some of my earliest, like Mike Cohn was a big person of Agile Denver for a really long time and stuff. And I remember my first time meeting Mike and him just being like, "Oh, let's just chat," right? Like it's very inviting and engaging, and it's like whatever topics come up or what topics that we want to talk about, and that's I don't know. I find it challenging and inspiring and engaging all at once, and it's what keeps me coming back and engaging with it nonstop. I love it.
cool.
And
So
we have a big event coming up. Our next event coming up is in July.
and that is like add what Mile High Agile or something.
So it's we scaled it back to restart it after 2020 and the chaos of all of that stuff. And so we are doing a 1 day event, a conference event. And it's actually going to be on a Sunday this year, which we don't usually do, but it's the lead into the main Agile Alliance conference of Agile 2025. So we were able to partner with them and kind of they normally their Sunday event is Women in Agile, but Women in Agile, I guess, weren't planning on doing anything this year, so they had space on Sunday. So they're like, local Agile Denver, do you want it? I was like, yes, we do. And so we're partnering with Agile Alliance. And so we're doing that Sunday where we'll have a keynote and then several sessions. And then we actually get to participate in the welcome event for the Agile Alliance conference for that week. So anybody who is not able to attend the main conference the whole week, which I hope you are, because I'll be there as well. I'm actually one of the keynotes.
What were the
But
dates again?
it is July 27th is
Okay.
Mile High Agile.
All
And
right.
then that leads into the next 3 days is Agile Alliance
All right.
conference.
Cool. Yeah, I think I'm going to be out of town at that point in time. I'm organizing conference, and I'm pretty sure it's that week.
Boo.
Yeah, we're
Boo.
going to Chicago. So,
This is the one event that I like I make sure is on my calendar for the next year. I have been attending the Agile Alliance conference since 2007 every year.
so actually, that is a good question I have for you. You attend a lot of events. What are some of the highlight events? If you're like, aside from Mile High Agile, are there events that you're like, if you get a chance, these are the ones that you should go to?
So I am always going, as I was just mentioning, my first Agile event specifically was Agile Alliance Conference in 2007, and I've been attending it every year. And especially when I was a practitioner, you only really got to go to one event, so I just go to that one each year. By hands down, if I had to credit most of my learning, growth, network, things like that, it has come from that event. Like it was the biggest, it was the most global one. It just for some people it's too big, but I'm a big extrovert, so I loved it. But it by far was the one that challenged me. I mean, it's where I met Diana Larson. Like it's just on every front with that one. So that's my always my biased favorite across the board. Then of course I've got to say Mile High Agile and the local regional events. But a lot of regional events are really powerful for like much smaller scale for more intimate you'll see the same people, especially if you're from that region, although some people come in from different regions on the regional ones as well. I mean, I've personally been this year alone I've been to Indianapolis one, I've been to Virginia's one. So people go to other regions, but it's nice to continue to build a stronger network of that local regional community over and have it be on a smaller scale. My other favorite, I think the other one that I tend to go to often and really appreciate are the Techwell ones. It used to be called Software Quality Engineer, and Techwell hosts a number of a series of events. And one of the reasons why I really like Techwell events is because they do a combination of workshops and sessions, and so people can get certifications or they can get a workshop or they can get a session, and so it's got a nice mix for people depending on what they're interested in learning and doing those things. So the Techwell does a really good job in that, and it's one that I have gone to on a fairly frequent basis. In fact, I'm headed to a Techwell event in 3 days.
Ah, cool. Very good. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about certifications. So,
Okay.
uh, yeah, basically, I mean, I'm more or less self-taught. I don't think I've ever taken an official Agile training certification, except for the course that I took from you, which we'll talk about that in a minute too. But yeah, so like as somebody who is a software developer, kind of self-taught, like figured a lot of the Agile stuff out on their own, like what is the value proposition for getting the certifications? Which certifications are worth pursuing?
So I guess let me give my historical background disclaimer, possibly to start, is for a very long time I was anti-certification. Um, and not in a really like robust, like yell at the top of my lungs level, but I had kind of that similar, like, what's the value? What's the point? And I just didn't really, to me, it was a lot of jumping through hoops with things, and I just didn't see necessarily always the value with it. Now, when I joined Agile for All, like there was a cohort of a number of us that came together. One of my colleagues was like, "You're actually the most experienced of us, and you're the one that officially can't teach it. Like, go get the damn certification." Like, and And here's what I experienced in Giddy. In fact, even in my interview to become a certified trainer and things like that, one of the questions I got asked was, "Why finally now, Tricia?" Because I had been in the community, I was speaking, I was doing a number of things, but I just wasn't part of certification community. And my answer a little bit at the time, my very initial answer was to be able to help my colleagues so that if they had a class and they couldn't run it, I would do it. And that really was my initial motivation. Like I didn't really still see any or not see any value. I just didn't really get it to that degree. After being a certified trainer, now whether that certification body is IC Agile, Agile Academy, Scrum Alliance, it doesn't matter, right? To some degree, I still am very agnostic in a lot of those areas. But what I have experienced now in doing more certification level trainings is a couple of things. One, I'm now realizing how many people don't know the basics. How many people, like I had a guy in one of my classes not too long ago that was just like, I already know this. I can't believe I have to take this class. This is so stupid. I've been doing Agile before Agile was even a term. And then proceeded to answer every one of my questions wrong for the next hour. like wrong, not even slightly wrong, like massively wrong. And we got to the break and he, to his credit, ended up going, okay, clearly I actually don't know what this is. I'm ready to learn. And I think that that's been the interesting part for me is that even people that will say I'm super experienced when they take a class with me or what I've been teaching class is how much they're like, "Ooh, I didn't know that history, or I didn't know that foundation, or I didn't know that real root cause why, or I didn't know how that was related to this." And a lot of times that information helps you to better implement, helps you to better be, helps you to better understand how to apply and what you're trying to do. And there's a lot of the self-taught that some of it's phenomenal and some of it's really bad. And I'm now realizing, as much as I was early on self taught, because of that Agile Alliance conference, I had enough to help me understand where that line was. So although I wasn't getting certifications, I was getting trainings. I was getting in a outside of your company, outside of your echo chamber of learning. And I think that's the big thing is whether it's an official certification, it's an award, it's a certificate, I don't care. What I think I really value now more than anything is that you are getting learning outside of an echo chamber, outside of your immediate team or your situation, or your company that might be teaching kind of things that will work for them, but not necessarily things that in the big scale might work the best or what's possible and things. And that's where I've now go, okay, I'm not opposed to certifications because I don't care about the actual cert. I care about the learning and the exposure outside of it. And I have found in some cases, some organizations won't let people do it without that. And so in the reality is it's a game that a lot of people have to play. I'm I'm now squarely in the spot of they're not evil, but they're not saving the world either. And what I care about is the learning.
Yeah, I mean, being a developer, I identify with that because a lot of self-taught developers they have holes in their knowledge that have just never been tested. They just don't know, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
like basic knowledge out there that they've just never encountered. And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like I've had my
fantastic.
son already go through some of my classes, even
Yeah,
in college. And he's going to the Mile High Agile conference because it's important. And in a lot of cases I was never as a developer told to do those kinds of learnings. It was just heads down, right? And
yeah.
and
Well, that brings up an interesting point that I made the other day. I was talking to somebody that professional athletes, they spend a very tiny portion of their time actually like doing the sport. They spend a lot of time practicing. And as developers, and I don't know, maybe agilists as well, but developers specifically, like we spend most of our time heads down doing coding and never spend time practicing or trading or doing any of those things.
and mental, right, development, all of these things. Yeah, 100%. That's a phenomenal analogy with the things.
So I did take a class from you recently. I could have gotten CE credits if I wanted, even though I don't have a certification, but it was on agile coaching, and I found it very interesting actually. because part of it is my tagline is like I consider myself like a teacher, coach, and mentor, but I never really like it was never clear to me until going through your class. It made it very clear like what each of those things were and like what the distinctions were, and I thought that was really useful.
Yeah, again, full confession, I didn't know for a really long time. Like, I had no idea. Nobody told me that these were one, skills that I needed, two, that how powerful they, or what the difference was of them. And so it is fascinating. A lot of times, even when I simplify it down to like training is about transferring knowledge. Because as a leader, you don't want to have all the knowledge, otherwise you're the bottleneck, right? And people can logically get behind that. But the problem is they don't realize that training is a whole skill set in itself. It's not just a PowerPoint slide deck, it's not just a read the manual, right? Like it's a whole skill set in itself. And then there's mentoring, which is giving advice, right? And again, there are just times that as a leader, it's like, ooh, you need just a little bit of help, right? But I still want you to own the choice. I still want you to make the decision because I'm trying to create that autonomy, that motivation on those fronts. But I do have knowledge. I think too many times agilists go, well, if you're leaders, you're not supposed to have any answers. No, like, come on. Like, of course you have experience. Of course you have knowledge. And you shouldn't be holding on to it like, he. Like, that's ridiculous. And so, but learning how to mentor in a way that doesn't tell, in a way that doesn't somebody said, well, I'm just giving you advice, and I'm like, and I'm choosing not to do it, and they're like, but it's advice, and I'm like, and I'm choosing not to do it. Like that's what like that's what advice is. If you're expecting me to do it, then it's not advice, it's you're trying to tell me and making it seem like I've got it right. Like, but again, if you're not learning these things, and nobody was teaching me that. And then coaching is about actually helping to unlock the other person's wisdom. And the easiest way for me to kind of highlight this at a very simple way is I have people think about times where as they were talking, they thought of a solution, right? Just as you were venting or ranting to somebody, you thought of a solution or something to try, or you came up with an epiphany. We all have experiences of doing this, right? Where we're just talking, and then I'll be, wait, actually, I think I could do that, right? Like, and you have that moment. That's what coaching's about, is creating a space where somebody can do that, where somebody can keep digging in going, okay, I think I'm stuck, but I'm not stuck. I'm creative. I'm intelligent. How do I get there? And that is a whole, again, a skill set to be able to create an environment that makes the other person feel comfortable to dig, because that's what you're asking them to do, is dig internally. And I find in my experience, most leaders have no idea what coaching is, no skills in it. And that's the saddest part for me, because a lot of times coaching is that how you get your team to that next level. Because if you start creating people and teams that are like, well, we can figure this out. We can be a resilient learning team, right? We can figure this stuff out. We've got this. This team's going to go further, right? Then they're like, oh, Tricia, what should we do? Oh, Tricia, tell us what to do. It's a bottleneck. And I watched performance of my teams just explode as I started learning what it meant to coach in particular. Mentoring and training, yes, but there was still this like reliance on my content in that area. But when I started really learning how to honestly facilitate and coach, the performance just took off.
Yeah.
Took off. And I was like, oh, I have a lot of people to apologize to. Because I didn't know what I didn't know, and that's the hard part. And so that the course you even took is a fundamentals, is a foundations, is essentials, but understanding even what that really means.
Yeah, that was definitely eye-opening to me because I had not put those all in their own separate boxes. But I've been trying this out with my kids a lot too, and it's hard to figure out where the best thing is, because oftentimes they're like, "Can you help me with this? Help me with this?" And you're like, I've seen you put your shoes on before. I know you know how to do this. Like, trying to encourage them to do things themselves without like me. Yeah.
It's a dance. It's a dance. And I don't actually recommend always picking, like, I don't say start with your spouse or your significant other or children.
Yeah.
Sometimes that can be the most challenging ones in those situations. Um, uh, but it's applicable in life, not just in work.
Yeah. One of my business coaches used to always say, like, any good business idea, you should be able to apply it in like all aspects of your life.
Yeah.
And also for like a lot of the agile ideas too. There was one where some guy was talking about like agile grocery shopping or something with his wife, and I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah, I don't have a working agreement with my husband. I think that's been more informal, but we probably could benefit from one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole thing too, actually, that I was unaware of. I took a class from somebody a while ago about working agree. They did either a class or workshop about working agreements, and that was also eye-opening as well.
Yeah, my favorite book for that is one of Diana Larson's other books called Lift Off.
Okay, I'll have to
And it's
look.
all about chartering, whether it's on the project side or the team side.
Yeah, just having those rules written down, I think, is really
Yeah.
good. Particularly like,
They can change. It's
yep,
just having some agreements.
yeah. Well, actually, see the change part. An interesting thing that I got out of that was that anytime you add or remove someone from the team, you need to revisit those because the team dynamics change dramatically, which was
Yes, they
not
do.
something that I necessarily like would have thought. I mean, it makes sense when you hear somebody say it, but yeah,
Yeah, but we treat people like they should just assimilate versus that there's a new level of co-intelligence potential in the team with any kind of team changes.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that goes back to the whole like viewing people as interchangeable cogs, and I just pick a person from over here and throw them over there, and that goes back to that industrial mindset too. I think a lot as opposed to the knowledge mindset. It's like if
And
you're
I'm
putting
not
knowledge,
opposed to reteaming. There's Heidi Heflin has a book called Dynamic Reteaming, and I'm not opposed to reteaming in different ways because I think there's a lot of value to it. But again, you have to understand the impacts, you have to understand the challenges that come with it, and you do though. Like when I was the director of development, we had a we called it at the time. This was a long time. This was early on, but they called it like D90X, developer 90X, like you went from team to team over 90 days. Like it was a play
yeah,
off of the exercise program P90 or P90X or whatever it was called. And honestly, we did originally 90 days because we were like, oh, if a developer goes onto a new team, they can't add really any value for like at least, 2 months or like, and we end up realizing, oh, wait, when we use that person in a fresh eyes perspective, when we're doing collaboration, when we actually have the similar ground rules of working agreements across different teams and we understand how we're working together and it's collaborative, it was adjusted to 30 days because man, we could get value quickly, but there were a lot of conditions that had to be placed in the system in order to achieve that. So I'm not anti-reteaming, but it really needs to be done intentionally, and there's a lot of things that need to happen in the system to help get the most value from it.
do you feel like doing ensemble programming helps with that? Because I would think that would help, right? Because if you bring somebody new on the team and they're just like another member of the ensemble, like that knowledge transfer has to be a lot easier, right?
I think so. But not as a current developer. I'm not going to make a
Yeah, yeah.
formal claim.
Okay. Yeah. That
Nobody wants me coding anymore. I did fix my son's homework project the other day and found where the exception was, but
oh, well, there you go.
I was very proud of myself. I didn't even need Copilot to do it.
So that's a question. Do you find that people tend to fit into like the developer bucket or more of like the project manager agile? Like, is there a lot of
I don't.
crossover? Or do
So
you
maybe
need to
it's
like
because
eventually become dedicated to one or the other? Or
no, maybe it's because it's my background, but I don't like it's all part of my identity. I still own that I'm a developer, even if I'm not actively coding.
yeah,
It is still part of my identity. It's why I stay primarily in software development organizations because I care about what that industry and what that discipline delivers and does, even if I'm not actively coding. I stopped actively coding because I was actually causing harm. I would take a keyboard from somebody and start coding if they told me they couldn't. I was causing harm and also from a scalability and a bottleneck. You just if I'm going to get more specialized and skilled in a certain discipline, it means a different discipline is going to be less skilled. And at some point I can't be a master in everything. And I found that the rewards in this category were more to me than the lines of code that I was writing before. And let me be clear, I was never going to be like the top rated architect on all like I was a solid developer engineer, right? I was a solid programmer on algorithmically my brain just got it. I was detail oriented. I was a solid developer and a lead developer in that regard. But I just got more rewards when I was leading than when I was coding. And other people will experience the other. And so I don't always think it's a necessary choice. I think there are people that blend or have the ability to still speak the world, right? And
Mhm.
respect it. But I do think at some point it's a specialization of where your preference and your choices.
Yeah, well, also thinking about this lately, just thinking about some recent threads that I saw online. As you move up, I feel like there's also the danger of if you start coding or keep coding, that there's like this power dynamic that goes on. You know, like if
Yeah.
you're mobbing and like this, the CTO is in your mob, like that's a very different mob
Well,
mentality.
and then not only that is the very different mob, but there was an element of like I remember saying to somebody once when I was a director of development, and I said, if you're relying on me to code, we have a big problem because my job isn't,
Hmm.
I'm hiring engineers. They're going to be better at it than I am. I am still like, my IDEs are very different than your IDEs.
Yeah.
Like, and all these different things that are going on. And at the end of the day, leadership is about focusing on the environment so that they can code, they can do the best job. Now I can't I am not necessarily in the camp that like, oh, anybody can be the director of development if you have no technical background whatsoever. I'm not in that camp, but I'm also not in the camp of like you have to prove yourself as a coder before you're allowed to do a senior technical role. In fact, I don't want my CTOs coding anymore. I don't want my directors, I don't want them coding anymore because not only power dynamics, but also you're not then doing your job.
Yeah, I think that goes to like where do you add the most value? And if you're the CTO, presumably you're there because you add value doing the CTO things, not the individual contributor.
No, if you enjoy on the side doing little like fan freaking tastic,
Mhm.
but it's just not your job.
Yeah, no, that's good. I feel like
And if you're gonna force a CTO to do two jobs like that, then chances are you have a culture that's forcing people to do multiple jobs and then blaming them for their performance.
yeah, because also then too, your time and your attention is split between two different
You're
things.
role
You're not really
modeling
good at
some
either
bad
one.
behaviors in that organization.
Yeah, very good. I feel like we covered a ton of ground. Um, are there?
I'm pretty open book. What do you got?
Yeah,
Hit me with
I'm
it.
just thinking
I'll
like,
go
are
there.
there any open threads that we haven't closed, or anything that popped in
I
your
have
head as well?
opinions for days. I don't actually. I wonder if I ever don't have an opinion or something to say. But in general, I always have opinions.
Yeah. No, well, I like people who have opinions. I like people who are passionate. But after reading the Adam Grant book, Think Again, I do like, and I've said this before, like strong opinions held weakly or something like, be passionate. I like people who have opinions. If you're just like, oh, I don't know about that, like,
But
pick a
be
side.
willing to
But at
say I
some
was
point,
wrong,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like I have had to apologize multiple points in my career. I will apologize again. Like I will do something that I now know better, right? You don't know what you don't know. And so yeah, I have done so many book clubs on that Think Again book. I will reread it again and again. In fact, it's right there. Like but I love his concept of just the confident humility. Like I'm confident, but I'm also humble to know I don't know everything.
yeah. I think that's the real like point of learning. It's that Dunning-Kruger thing when you realize how much you don't know, and it's like,
I don't want to be on top of what he calls Mount Stupid.
yeah. Unfortunately, that's like a part of human nature. We all end up there at some point.
Yeah, yeah, it's common.
Yeah, you just need to learn not to blame yourself
Oh,
when
and
you
here
get
my doggy's making an appearance. I'm sorry.
there. But I thought that was interesting about your book too. Before we wrap things up, it was the blame is not just like blaming others, but also sometimes we blame ourselves, which is I
Yeah,
think
shame is no joke. I used to say a statement that I pretended as if it was something I was proud of, and I would say if I don't call myself stupid at least once a day, I'm not pushing myself hard enough. And I why I would ever call myself stupid like right, but it was a way for me to deal with shame and it's just as dangerous. for learning and for engagement.
I'll take that in a slightly different direction, though. I've often said if you don't look back at previous work you did and you don't cringe a little bit, you don't say, oh, I could have done this or that differently, it means that you haven't learned anything, you haven't grown. So it's
Yeah,
not like,
cringe
it's
is
like
different than
looking
calling
back.
yourself
Yeah,
stupid.
it's different than the shame thing, right? The shame thing is, oh, I was so stupid, I was so dumb. And the cringing is like, oh, I can't believe I did that because I didn't know what I know now.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Right? Like,
it's more of a positive thing.
the hindsight bias. Like, that's just
Yeah,
engaging your hindsight bias. Like, it seems so obvious after the fact. Like, how did I miss that? Right?
yeah.
But yeah, it was the calling myself stupid that was like, but it's a real thing, especially where we'll get in our own heads, and even if nobody's actively blaming us, we can feel it and perceive it.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something to be aware of and catch yourself doing if you're doing that and figure out a way around it. Well, what is the way around that, actually? There you go. That's a good question.
For yourself when you're shaming
Yeah.
yourself. Um, so I take some time, and it's different for everybody, just like incentivized is different. So for me personally, one of the things that I have to do is realize that I'm telling myself a story that isn't true. Meaning I'm embarrassed by something. And so, because I'm embarrassed, I'm trying to reinforce the story as to why that happened that isn't actually true. So, like, if I call myself stupid because I messed something up, it's like I've messed other things up before. I wasn't stupid at that. It was not knowing something, or it was caring so much that I was just beating myself up about it, right? And so, a lot of times, what I have to do is I have to what's called reframe it. Like, I have to reframe, like, okay, I can still own this was a problem and not take it in a personal way that beats myself up for it, right? So, like, I can acknowledge and honor the challenge, the situation, the mistake, the error, the failure, and learn from it and go forward without creating a new identity of like I'm stupid or I'm not very good or any of those things. And so, and if it doesn't help me to just even recognize that, to remind myself of other times that I've actually tried to do that to myself and it wasn't true. And so it's rewriting that narrative for me that is helpful.
Yeah, that's interesting. We tell ourselves stories all the time. And the
And they're to
interesting thing,
protect ourselves.
yeah, no, it does serve a purpose. But the interesting thing is the stories are just stories and we can tell a different story.
Correct.
We can't change what happened. Like there's still the facts of what happened, but the explanation, the meaning that we give it in our head, that's all made up.
Correct.
And so we can make up, like something happens to you, you can make up a bunch of different stories about it. So you might as well pick one that empowers you.
Well, and helps you to move forward
Yeah.
in a healthier way. And for me, this was easier to do once I started to realize that I was a quote unquote role model. Like I was like, well, it's fine. I call myself stupid all the time. And then one of my mentees called herself stupid. I literally wanted to strangle her. I was like, don't you ever call yourself stupid. And she's like, why? You do. And I was like, oh, no, like, no, don't do what I do, right? And so I think for me, that reframing and that rewriting that history became a lot easier when I felt the responsibility of what I was role modeling as a leader as well.
Yeah. Well, you know who's really good for that? Kids.
Yeah.
They always, they say something, you're like, where did you learn that? And
They're like, you.
oh,
Like, oopsies.
no, don't do
Oopsies.
that. Yeah. That definitely catches you off guard. All right. Well, it's been a great conversation.
I can't believe it. This time's already flown by.
Yeah. Any last minute thoughts or
Oh, uh,
come to Mile High Agile if you're in
yes.
Bedford? Yeah.
Yes, come see us with Mile High Agile on July 27th. You can see it on milehigh.org and also Agile Alliance Conference too. I'll be the keynote on Tuesday. So
Oh, okay. Cool.
yeah.
Very good. All right. Thank you. That's it for today's episode of the LabVIEW Experiment. Thanks for listening. If you have any comments or questions, head over to thelabviewexperiment.com and drop me a note. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the LV Experiment.